Yo, 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 Multiplier here, and just finished this track, Blueprint Method Remix. So yeah, while it's fresh in my head, I'm going to do this how I made video, since the creative workflow is different for remixes, and especially with this remix, so maybe you find it useful. I know I personally find the more kind of conceptual videos where they show how the whole process of the track works, I find them more useful, because you can learn how to make presets and how to make kick drums or whatever else, but after about 6 months of doing that, yeah, you're going to get stuck actually making a track. So I find it really useful when the pros kind of show you how a track evolved and how they approached it. Now, while I might not be Pendulum, I can still make a track and they do alright. So yeah, I'll show you how this one came about and what my thoughts were. So yeah, I'm going to quickly play a bit of it, not too much of it, up to maybe 32, 33 bars, and then I'll tell you how I did it. Cool.
Multiplier, fucking shit up.
Sweet, so that gives you a flavour. It's kind of completely mental. Lots of bass, so if you didn't hear the bass, yeah, there's a load of bass. Completely changes the feel of it because of all the weight. But yeah, it's a bit mad. Might be obvious that I watched a video, the future music in the studio with Crookers this morning, which kind of inspired me to make a track like this, because this is their kind of style. It's kind of electro, some non-standard patterns like those kicks and not on the beat, for example. And also Crookers are quite good for coming up with unique arrangements and kind of throwing you off with weird breaks and being slightly simple, like as far as having only a few elements at any one time in parts of the track, just like I have here. There's only one element there and one element at a time there, stuff like that. Basically got quote unquote inspired by Crookers for that. So yeah, basically with remixes you've got two approaches, or pretty much two approaches. One of which is you take something memorable from the original, something like a vocal or a melody, and then you incorporate that in your track so you can recognize the original. The other option is you almost just sample it and use lots of the original noises, and create your own musical themes, or whatever you want to call them, from the original sounds. There's pros and cons of each way. Tends to be, if you use the musical idea from the original, or say like a vocal, structurally you're sorted, stuff like what key you're in, stuff like that is quite simple. The downside is you have to make more sounds normally, but I guess it's kind of a pro and a con depending on how you look at it. And if you use the more sample based thing like I have here, quite quickly and easily you can make an entire track, since, like, see here I've got main sample, so just a sample kind of repeated. Now it didn't take much to layer that up with just a few simple synths and a sub bass and a kick and snare. Suddenly the track sounds full, sounds complete, because all the processing and synthesis has been done by the original guy making these samples. So it's kind of just depends, really. Depends on the track, depends what you want to do. In my case, I didn't have much choice. There wasn't much of a melody, wasn't a vocal, so yeah, I did the whole sample based thing. Now, the closest to kind of like a recognizable bit is this bit here. Which isn't much, it's not that recognizable, but you would recognize it if you heard the original, which isn't out yet, so you won't recognize it. But yeah, I've just thrown that in kind of to mix things up and just kind of give you something early recognizable, make it feel a little bit more like a remix, because these sounds weren't the predominant ones at all in the original. So as you can see, if you've just been scanning over the arrangement, got kicks, snares, all these samples. These are basically the samples from the stems, and then I've got my own stuff, which is from here to here, and then after that it's just effects. So you see, it's not that much to it. It's a super simple track as far as what's in it. So simple, the fact that I wrote the whole thing in about an hour, which I've virtually never really done before. Kind of just got super inspired, and just stuff like the sounds I was trying worked really quickly. Things like finding this right percussion loop. I found it was the second one I chose, and it just worked perfectly, which normally that alone can take half an hour. So it was the fact that all these little things just happened to happen quicker than normal. So how did the track really happen? Yeah, I had this kick pattern that was a bit mad. I've been wanting to do a track with this pattern for a while now. Crookers have used this pattern before, or at least a similar one. It's not a new pattern, but it's virtually never used because it makes life difficult for DJs. But you know what? Crookers screw with DJs, so I'm going to do it too. And that kind of set the scene as far as, do I make the track DJ friendly? It's not that friendly at all. Things like there's only 8 bars between the start and the first, like, if you want to call it a drop, still recording, and there's not much of an outro. There's no drums in the intro, so sort of thing. I guess in the realm of electronic dance music, this isn't a DJ friendly track at all. It's right down there. It's not quite like weird and experimental, but it's more just cool. And I could DJ it, because nowadays with technology, you don't really need super DJ friendly tracks. That's only if you're using CDJs and stuff do you really need all those drums and really structured tracks. So yeah, I kind of knew I was doing something not that friendly, so it kind of opened me up a bit creatively. And as you may have guessed, I started off with this drop right here. I didn't have this sound, so basically I created this, which is just a kick and a sub bass. Sub bass just made a massive. It's just a sine wave. You can make it in any synth. It literally doesn't matter. Kick, found it in a sample pack. No processing, because as I told you a million times, if you got enough good samples, you don't need to process your kicks, because they come processed. It's like, you don't need to compress it. Look, it's compressed, sorted for you. Don't need to EQ it. Someone EQ'd it when he made it. It's like, you can process it in the mixing thing, like the mixing process, if you even need to, but chances are you don't. So just find a good sample, and and then just sub bass, side chain it so that the sub bass moves out of the way for the kick. Obvious stuff, standard stuff. And luckily this sample is so processed originally that I didn't need to process it. It was nice and wide. It's nice, got a cool range of frequencies. Got this down sweep to fill up the top end, which you can see it's been high passed. It's just a sample, any old thing from a Vengeance pack. Super standard stuff. As far as the sounds, they are all normal sounds. The only thing really different with this track is stuff like the drum patterns and the arrangement. So it's things like, I'm not going to go into details, these builds, they're super standard, like, for example. I mean, yeah, that's one of my presets I use in a lot of songs. It's just a standard sound. Same with the kicks. It's not a radical kick. I mean, it's not a normal kick, but I found it in a sample pack. Same with the snare. Same with all these noises. So literally with this track, it was all down to coming up with a cool arrangement and picking these right samples. So you can see color coded them so I recognize them, and then I split it all up into all these tracks. Literally each one is just a different point in the stem. So that's the end of it. That's somewhere near the end. That's somewhere else in it. So that's literally all I done. Pick a point, loop it, kind of, and then for some reason it sounds like all synthy and shit when it's all linked up, and it all works. And if it doesn't sound cool, you try something else. 'Cause it's the sort of thing, even though you might have guessed if it's a remix, these noises, they all sound really processed, but I didn't process them at all. Not one of these is processed beyond simple cutting the low end, which is what this is. It's just getting rid of the low end, but that's just a standard mixing tip. And yeah, it's, as you can see from the track, I literally just threw a load of cool sounds together, tried something new. Things like this percussion loop, it's just a standard Vengeance electro percussion loop, which doesn't sound like much, but for some reason it really works with this drum pattern and the snare. Cool. So I'm not going to talk any more about sounds because they're pretty simple, to be honest. So arrangement, why did I do what I do? Obviously I wanted to start off with something a bit different, so I came up with this cool little intro.
Multiplier, fucking shit up.
Just, yeah, me saying multiplier fucking shit up. Processed it a bit, got a cool animal noise, some cool stuttery thing from one of these other sounds, and then yeah, straight into the build. Something pretty simple, some claps. Oh, go away spotlight. Just getting louder and high passed. It's all standard stuff. It's just things like with the arrangement, I started off with just something nice and simple. It's just, there's no snares, there's no percussion loop. Standard stuff, and then I kind of bring elements in. So I bring in the snares, and then I bring in this percussion loop. This percussion loop is really important because without it, the whole track doesn't seem dancey enough, and it's quite subtle, but this kind of first bit is just kind of like pounding you, like that's for the impact, and then after a little bit you've had enough of impact, you can't keep sustaining the impact, so mix it up, make it more dancey. Just gives it some swing, gives it some groove, and then it's just, again, standard sort of stuff. Got another build coming in halfway through to kind of build you up to the end of this like phrase, this first section, and it's all same stuff as normal. Have a cool little vocal bit right before the start of a new bit, which is just a Vengeance vocal sample with is it a ping pong delay? Yeah, ping pong delay, no feedback, just to give it a bit of stereo width and movement and just make it a bit more interesting. All super standard stuff. And yeah, that was the main drop sorted. Second drop, it's all the same, just different noise. As I've told you before, if you've seen these other videos, the key to music is finding the balance between stuff people recognize and stuff people don't recognize. So it's things like, got the first section here, second section here. The only main difference is if you look at main sample and third sample. Main sample the whole way through, and then here it's the third sample for a bit, main sample, and then looped. And then I think there might be some subtle differences with the sub bass. Again, it's just making things very slightly different. That's all you need to do. And I've got the percussion in early as well, for example. So it's just rearranging things. Basically, once I'd done this half and then I got a few more noises, it was just arrangement. There were no more noises. It was nice and simple. And yeah, I did these main sections first because they're much easier. Getting from there to there took all of 5 minutes, just finding another sound. And then to do these breaks, I basically wanted to do something kind of crooked style, and I quite like how Sebastian in his breaks, he doesn't overcomplicate them sometimes. Sometimes he just uses cool noises and then shows you different cool noises, and that's what this bit is about. Now, it sounds super simple, you can't dance to it. Yeah, it's just in there for interest. It's kind of, that's cool noises. And you can tell because it's only 4 bars long. If it was any longer, you get bored of it. So you have to find the right balance. And that's basically what I'm doing in the whole break. Just showing you cool noises. I haven't got any super cliche builds and stuff. So yeah, it's just showing you new stuff, twisting it a bit. Like stuff like taking out the sub bass and bringing it back for a bit, taking it out. Same with kicks. I've got these high pass kicks, for example. So you see you've got these kicks are normal kicks, and then these ones are with all the bottom end out, which is again just done by EQ8, and then reduce the gain because for some reason the gain goes up. Fucking no idea why, but yeah, that's just to make sure the levels are geared. And yeah, it's just, I mean, it's hard to explain exactly why I stuck stuff where I did, other than you gotta copy and paste bits and then move shit around. That's all there is to it. And then for the outro, similar sort of thing, just cool noises like. Just kind of like it winding down, and it's a nice way to kind of tail end the song off, because these are the high pass kicks, so like the weight goes away and then it simplifies out, thins out, and then it just thins away to nothing. Nice and simple, right? 17 minutes, nice and quick run through, just like it was a nice and quick track to do, which makes sense, I guess. You're wondering what like these are. It's just the hall kicks. Again, virtually nothing is processed. That's not processed. That's just high pass. Like I high pass everything, standard mixing thing, and then yeah. What's this processed? No, just a bit of subtle sidechain compression, because it's whenever you got any synths doing anything, like to hear this noise. So yeah, I mean, you want to sidechain all synths, even if it's subtle. Just gives it that rhythmicness, whatever you call it, kind of the repetition, the pumping effect, which you want in a dance track. It's super important. And yeah, so that's how the track came about. Mixing, standard stuff as normal. High passed everything using, for example, this preset. I've got mega low cut 1 and 2. 2's just with that hidden. Just layered up a million high pass filters, and then kind of by dragging this around you can choose where to cut it, and it just gets rid of all the low end, gives you all the headroom in the world you want, and it means your low end isn't muddied up. It's nice and clear, and it's the sort of thing you can never really trust your low end, because unless you've got the best room in the world and you've got a lot of experience listening, you can't mix low end. You can't hear the subtleties of 30 hertz at like minus 40 dB. You just can't. So like, use your eyes, guarantee what is there. I know only the kicks and only the sub is contributing at all below 100 hertz, because I've made sure with high passes that everything else isn't putting anything that low through to the master. And that means like my sub, I know exactly what is going to that because I synthesized the sine wave. I know it's just a sine wave. And then the kicks, I know the kicks are good from a decent sample pack. I know they're going to translate to a club system. And that's it. Low end is sorted. No nightmare compression. No trying to make sure my room has got bass traps and all that shit. I do all this in headphones, but yeah, I know the sub is going to work because just use my eyes and like scientifically make sure I know what low end is going through, and that's one of my standard approaches, the low end. Other than that, few bits of reverb, like got the claps and a reverb send A to kind of have a nice long reverb. Same with this animal noise, and then like snares, return track B, go into living room, which is a much smaller room, reverb, more like a quick echo as opposed to kind of this long trail. So bigger the room, the more long the tail is. Again, throw out another important tip. If you're finding your reverb is just this big sea of noise and you can't differentiate anything, it's because you're sending too much. You can see here I sent snares to one, claps to another. This noise is just the beginning, and that means you can pick out what reverb is kind of from what. So it means like the reverb from the snare, you can actually, although you do have to listen out for it, you can actually, your brain can pick up the reverb from the snare because it's the only thing getting reverb. Now, if I kind of soloed every track and then gave it a little bit of reverb, it would sound better soloed. But then if I did that to all the tracks, then everything was sending a little bit through. What would happen is this reverb thing would just be this big noise and you wouldn't be able to differentiate any original sound from it, and it would just be horrible. So be selective in what you send to reverbs and it'll be a lot cleaner. And if you wonder why I put them on return tracks, it's so I can just send everything there nice and easy, and I can also process it if I want. But yeah, in this case I haven't processed it at all. Like I haven't done virtually anything in this track. Yeah, panning, virtually no panning, because it's stuff like these samples, they're already processed, they're nice and wide. I don't need to pan them, I don't need to do any cool stereo processing to make it wide. It's like sorted, it's nice and wide, kicks are in the center already, snares are in the center already. The kicks is already so processed that the top end is in the sides and the bass is in the middle, and it's stuff like you choose good samples and all that shit's sorted for you. You don't need to worry about it. Like if you start making your own kicks, you have to make sure that the sub end is like compressed right and in the center, and your top end is all out wide. But just choose the right samples, don't have to worry about it. And yeah, literally the only panning thing I did was for these two synths, which are basically just builds. And then this one's obviously sustained. It's like build, sustained, and then this one's just a build. And basically what I did is, because they're a similar frequency, I panned them just slightly off center. I consciously didn't put them any wider because the samples were really wide and they had frequency content right on the sides. So I just wanted these kind of like out of each other's way but not wide. So I just nudged them a bit, and you'll be surprised how much of a difference even just that and that, because they're in the same frequency range, does. Like a lot of top mixers have this thing where there's only left, right and center and they just choose one of the three, but I'm of the kind of mixing philosophy that there's all these middle ground that you can use as well, and a lot of other pro mixers agree with me, or I guess I agree with them because they're the pros. But yeah, you'd be surprised what just nudging it, if you got two competing kind of tracks, just nudge them a bit either way and they'll still sound in the center, but you'll be able to differentiate them. And it's just stuff like you won't hear. Like if you heard this shit on SoundCloud and you were just listening quickly because you saw it on my Facebook feed and you were half looking at someone else, you don't know that that sound is slightly off center. It's a small thing, and just like having only one thing getting sent to the reverb, having all these little tweaks creates a better track in total. Things like all these effects, like this top end noise, fills out the top end, gives it, like differentiates this, like, or I guess what's the right word? Kind of specifies the start of a new bit, like a new short phrase. You don't hear that shit, but it all washes over you, and all these small tweaks, all these small changes do make a big difference. So it sounds small, but you do that 30 times, 400 times if it's a complicated track, the whole thing just sounds better. And you don't really know why, it sounds better, it sounds clearer. And yeah, so other than that, didn't really do much. I basically set the levels as I go along. I know some people like, I guess we've got a new demo. Lost my train of thought. They write the track and then they pull all the faders down, and then they, during the mixing process, start pulling them back up. I don't do that. I do it like Noisier, where I just tweak it as I go. I'm listening to the thing like a million times. Like as I'm producing, I keep re-listening to the same little bit. So if something sounds a little off, I'll just tweak it here and there. And then when it comes to mixing, it's pretty much there. Like I will double check to make sure something, like if I put in an effect or I put in something ages ago, that I haven't forgotten about it and it all kind of still works. So it's just like a quick once over, which makes the mixing process a lot quicker and less hassle, because it would take me a good 20 minutes to get all these levels just right again. They're all kind of subtly different, and yeah, it's just do it as you go, and then it's pretty much sorted, and then you just give it a once over, done. Right, how long was that? 26 minutes, nice and short, because to be honest, it was a really quick track to make, one of the quickest in recent times actually. I had the idea an hour and a bit later. It was kind of, all the elements were there and it was roughly arranged. 3.5 hours after that, I was like exporting it for master, and yeah, it was basically just those other 3.5 hours were tweaking the sounds, cleaning them up, doing a bit of mixing, kind of. Although there wasn't even much to it, it's things like getting all these levels just right, and high passing them in just the right places, and adding the reverb in just right, and choosing the right reverb. It's simple. There's only 2 reverbs and 2 things getting sent, but there's a lot of little things to do, so it does take time. And 3.5 hours to kind of tweak a song and mix it is very quick, by the way. So if you're making tracks in 2 hours, 4 hours, you're not trying hard enough, seriously. Like, what's his name? Wolfgang Gartner says he puts at least 400, 500 hours into each track. Granted, that's at the upper end of things, but like Rob Swire puts, like, granted not straight, but he put months into each single track, and he'll make 50, 60 versions of it, like tweaking the arrangement, adding new bits, remixing it before he even comes close to finishing it. Like, there are exceptions, but you got to put in the hours, basically. The only exception is times like this where you kind of, for some reason, the musical like idea comes to you quite quickly, and then all the mixing and producing and engineering, which is just using the software, you've already got that experience. So you, like, I know this preset, the build preset, already had made. I know where all these samples are on my computer because they're standard samples, and I know my samples folder. I just went to them, tried 3, chose my favorite, stuff like that. So if you get the musical idea quick and the rest of it happens to be quite simple, you can do it in a day. But yeah, if you're new to this, don't expect to do tracks quickly. Even if it can be useful just to kind of practice working quickly, because it is useful to commit to stuff. You don't want to keep endlessly tweaking shit, because after a certain point it just gets different, or worse, it doesn't get better. Like, if I give you 5 years to do, like if I had 5 years to do this remix, it wouldn't get much better than this. If you gave me like a month, like a slightly better musical idea might come to me, but yeah, it's not going to get much better. Like, chances are I'll give it another listen in a few months before it like gets released, just to make sure the mix is good and the master's good. But yeah, it's pretty much there. Got kind of lucky. Cool. So that's been how I made Blueprint Method Remix. Check me out. Just fuckload of links below me. Follow them all. If you like the track, if you ask me nicely on Facebook, I might send it to you. Otherwise, wait till it comes out on Relentik Records in a few months' time on the Blackout EP, which should be good, even though I haven't actually heard any of the tracks yet. I have faith. So cool. Have fun making tracks, and yeah, feel free to recommend shit for me to do videos on. because yeah, just do it. Cool. Have fun.